Welcome to another episode of Pound for Pound Boxer Report. Special Friday episode, Pound for Pound Boxer Report. The day before Anthony Joshua's title defense against Andy Ruiz in Madison Square Garden in NYC. I am your host, Michael. Joining me this week is Gail from Communities Digital News, Gus from Corruption and Boxing. What's going on, lady and gent?
Hey, enjoying this Friday night edition.
Bear with me. I'm having connection issues, so I may have to go in and out. Gail and Gus might have to take the show over for me. For those who are new, Pound for Pound Box Report, Pound for Pound Box Report live YouTube show, podcast, as well as blog discussing all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, we will talk about it. If you want to find out all things regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, the blog page is the place to go to, p4pboxreport.wordpress.com. That's the link. Check the rather blog page. You'll find links to where to find us all over social media, where to find us all over all platforms that carry podcasts, as well as the donate links. Let donation be the best nation. Got links to a Cash Me and PayPal donate link account, excuse me. Let's get things going by recapping what went down last week. I want to start off with ESPN card that took place in Florida. Jamal Herring fighting Masayuki Ito. Ito, the second defense of the WBO junior lightweight title. And to the surprise of many, Herring, he won by unanimous decision across the board. I think it was maybe 2 points on two judges' scorecards. I think maybe 3 or 4 points on the third. For me, I had it 16-12. I'll go to you. I'll go to you, Gail. And I wrote this on Twitter, but I just had a feeling that even though I thought Ito would win when we previewed the fight last week, just as the days and the hours was going along, sometimes you just get certain vibes and certain feelings, and I got that coming into this fight, and I started to change my mind that I just got the vibe that Herring could very well win this fight. And during the fight, here's the thing: Ito. This was Ito's third world championship fight, but when you look at their careers overall, pro and amateur, Herring had more experience, and that experience showed in this fight. Herring, mentally, he came in razor sharp, um, being trained by the team that trains Terrence Bud Crawford. I think Bud has signed him to, I think, a promotional deal or something to that effect. And he made Ito one-dimensional. Uh, Excellent use of the jab. He moved around just enough. Ito settled into throwing power punches, particularly with the right hand. The jab that we saw when he won the belt and in his first title defense, we didn't see in this fight. He went to the body, but not enough. Uh, is it more on Herring and what he made Ito not do, or did the lack of experience from Ito, who didn't have any professional fights, did that show?
There were a lot of ingredients here. First and foremost, enormous credit to Brian McIntyre, who's now trained Herring for 3 fights out of Omaha, Terrence Crawford's trainer. He put the perfect game plan together. Looking at Herring, having been in camp now for 3 fights, he's really settled in with the team. He feels the support. They've given him that extra level of confidence and the few tools he needs to wrap around his particular skill set, which is to work off that jab. And Herring has a great jab. Herring's not particularly powerful. He does have some knockouts, but he's not a one-punch power shot guy. He's a work behind the jab guy. And Bomac gave him the ability to fire that off and then circle to the right, to the left. When he was really on form in this fight, he launched that, and before Ito could get around and try to launch his right hand, which is a bazooka, Herring was out of the way, completely out of the way. The only rounds where Ito was competitive was where, for some reason, Herring decided he wanted to bang with him. And he got back to the corner, and both times McIntyre said, "You do not have to bang with him. Stop that." And Herring listened to him and returned to a more disciplined approach. And Ito was starting to get more and more and more frustrated as the fight went by. And Herring and McIntyre clearly could see it. And I think the big difference for Herring, I'm not sure he's learned anything completely new from McIntyre other than the lateral movement to get out of the way of a big power puncher. It's the confidence. It was that boost of confidence. It's having somebody like Terrence Crawford cheering you on and having his trainer getting you just that little extra push, convincing you, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do this. And that is, I think, what it took. And all the elements came together. Everybody, he was certainly the underdog, but if ever a fighter was being pulled for and rooted for, even among the media who try to stay neutral, given his backstory, given his service to the country as a Marine, given his status as a former Olympian, his family, the whole package, on Memorial Day weekend, if ever a fighter could feel people pulling for him, this was it. And frankly, Ito was made to order. As long as Herring stayed away from the right hand, he had a very good shot at winning, as long as he executed, and he absolutely did. So a lot of obviously Herring had to do the work, but Brian McIntyre put the game plan together, and it was absolutely perfect.
First, before I go to Gus, I want to say that we at the Pound for Pound Box Report, this show is being done with a bit of a heavy heart. Earlier today, just a few hours before the live recording this evening, May 31st, tragedy struck in Virginia Beach, Virginia. A shooting resulted in 12 people being killed. And we here at Pound for Pound Box Report certainly want to send our thoughts and prayers and our condolences to those who lost their lives in such a tragic shooting that took place in Virginia Beach, Virginia today. So I just wanted to get that note out before we go on any further with the show. I'm going back to you, Gus. Do you agree with Gail's assessment in terms of the fight? A lot of people on the nights were suggesting robbery, robbery, robbery. Personally, I didn't see it. I thought Herring won and won clearly. Your overall view?
My perspective is different from Gail, Mike. The fight did leave a bitter taste in my mouth. I felt that Top Rank were almost determined to put the belt on Jamal Herring for all of the sentimentality reasons, and given it being the anniversary of his deceased daughter, and he's an ex-Marine, and Memorial Day. So all of the elements were there. The sympathy vote for him, and the crowd were largely, the contingent was largely from the armed forces as well. And given it was a voluntary defense, so I felt Top Rank were almost desperate to get the belt of Ito, and I disagree with the scoring on the fight, Mike. I thought it was a lot closer for the reasons that I don't think a lot of Jamal Herring's punches were connecting. I felt that given that Ito was sometimes making the mistake of pivoting off to Herring's left, which is wrong for an orthodox fighter. So his feet would get caught up, and you'll sometimes get clipped with a check right hook of Herring sort of pivoting off, but the punches wouldn't land flush. So Ito would obviously fall off balance, sometimes career into the ropes. So I felt the judges may have scored those punches as legitimate scoring shots for Herring, which were not the case, as I don't think they were flush shots. He wasn't willing to exchange, so he was trying to use his height and his reach, trying to box a little bit more. He definitely didn't carry the power. Ito maybe was too reliant on his right hand, straight right hand. He can box a lot better than that, but his footwork for me was very frustrating, and that is what you touched upon, a lack of experience for an orthodox fighter. Something he wouldn't have made the mistake had he had a certain depth in the amateur, certainly fighting against the southpaw as well. So that was definitely a lack of experience there. But Rudy Hernandez is in his corner, and Rudy is a very experienced coach, and a coach who's renowned for making adjustments. Now, Ito did start making some adjustments later on in the fight, where he was having some success, sometimes varying the punches. He was shorting up on his right hand and then coming back a little bit more with his jab, which he was underutilizing earlier on. So Herring, maybe he felt a little bit too comfortable, started to sort of plant his feet and start trading a little bit. But as Gal mentioned, Ito was having the better success whenever the ranges shortened to a range where he was more comfortable at. Where obviously he could try and use his power punches to try and claw back some of the deficit. And I felt he did a lot of the middle and late rounds. I felt he definitely won a lot of those rounds. I felt he landed the harder shots as well. At no time did I see him hurt. But ultimately, I think Herring kept his body shape and his technique, and that definitely swayed the judges. But ultimately, I felt it was a very close fight. I would marginally give the edge to Herring. I said that live as well, but I disagree with how wide the cards were, and I was absolutely disgusted with the commentary team, ESPN, Joe, Andre, and Timothy Bradley. I think that's the worst trimerite of broadcasters I've heard. 100% biased. They gave Ito absolutely no credit. They were castigating him for his lack of boxing ability. Very harsh on the kid. Not deducing anything what he was doing in the ring. I've got no business watching ESPN with these guys ever again. I'll watch another broadcast.
Wow. You give your assessment, Gus. You're giving your assessment, Gail. I tend to lean more towards Gail here in her thoughts. Feel good story for Herring. Excuse me. He was on ESPN, the networks, following the fight. You have to be. We try to stay objective throughout here, and not favor fighters, not favor promoters, but favor the sport. But you can't help but be moved somewhat by what happened. But let's get to some reality here. Burchelt, WBC champion, he was in the ring following the fights. The question was posed to Herring, would he fight Burchelt? Because the word was that Burchelt was going to face the winner of this bout. Burchelt said he was down. Herring said, basically, if the money is right, he would be down. I'll go back to you, Gus, and then you can follow up, Gail. Would it be wise for Herring to go straight towards Burchelt? I say no. I think it's one thing to do what he did against Ito. Miguel Burchelt, yeah, you can say he has some flaws here and there. He could be hit, but that's a far different proposition.
I think the perennial issue is, Mike, Miguel Burchelt has had more than sufficient time to fight unifications, but he's done absolutely fuck all for the last 2 years. He's elected to fight on the other side of the border with pretty much no drug testing whatsoever, fighting at his sort of pace to try and develop his skills because he's still a young fighter. Now, all of a sudden, given the criticism...
Excuse me for interrupting. Herring kind of suggested that from his on Twitter when he said that from now on he wants to go through strict testing. For me, I thought there was a bit of a nod towards what you just mentioned about Burchelt and his lack of testing. Put that into the equation.
I mean, Mike, I mean, I don't have any sort of concrete evidence, but you know, Miguel, he could have fought unifications. He's had ample time, and I heard there was a little bit of a disagreement between Zanfer and himself in terms of the direction of his career. They definitely wanted the fight with the Puerto Rican kid, before, but I heard it was Burchard who was slightly reticent on not taking the fight, probably due to drug testing in the States. So I don't know, Mike, but he's had sufficient time. He is a good fighter. He's a very strong, powerful, strong puncher. I'm not too impressed with him. I think he's very aesthetically very ugly to watch. I see a hell of a lot of flaws in his career. I don't think Jamal Herring is the fighter that can exploit them. Miguel will not respect his power whatsoever. He'll walk him down and he'll probably knock him out, Mike. You can get away with that with Ito, but Miguel is better using both hands. He has got just enough power in his left hand than he does in his right hand, and that's the point here. Rosita was obviously favoring one hand, but in terms of what's next, it's down to obviously Top Rank and Bob Arum now. Herring can definitely, have a fight in his hometown. I think he's from New York. Is he from New York or somewhere?
Yes.
I'm not sure, but
yes.
Okay. So you couldn't begrudge a man for having a hometown, in front of his family and friends in New York. Burchelt has had 6 defenses, but Herring is obviously is in the latter sort of stages of his career, probably in his prime now. If he's developed a good relationship with, Brian McIntyre, certainly on the defensive side, which is good. That's a lot better than what I've seen him before. Because up against, Shafikov and that, he had no idea what he was doing fighting a southpaw. He was making the mistake what Ito was doing, coming into the power hand of a southpaw. So good to see that he's obviously corrected those deficiencies. So there's definitely improvement in his ring IQ as well. So I don't think there's any rush, Mike. I think they can still develop the relationship between Bomac, 1-2 more fights, and then if he's still looking good, winning the fight, in dominating fashion, not taking any punishment, then they can definitely press for a unification.
I'll pose the question to you, Gail. Should Herring go straight towards a unification against Burchell, or should he make a title difference or two and put some coin in the bank?
Well, if Herring is at all attached to his new belt, he wants none of Burchelt. And fair enough. Give him, a fairly easy mandatory of some kind that is either a hometown fight, or originally, before the fight was scheduled in Florida, there was discussion that the fight was going to take place at the Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton in Southern California. Now, that would be an absolute crazy, wild, huge event if it was held on a Marine Corps base, of which there are several good choices in Southern California, or you could do it out at Parris Island. I'm sure the Marines would pull out the stops. Aram's done that before. That would be a very interesting setting to celebrate his achievement. And, easy touch-up opponent. Then he needs to take on, one of his rivals in the division. And, you look at the rundown of the potential opponents that are legit belt holders or serious contenders, and Herring is going to have problems with nearly all of them. Burchell, Davis, Farmer, you have Andrew Cancio, who's going to fight here in 3 weeks. Jojo Diaz is back on the rise. There's some political issues with some of these guys, but there's a lot of choices. There's a lot of interesting choices. But fair enough. Give him give him a little bit of a victory lap fight. Because it's, it's a feel good story, good for him. But I don't think he should get too attached to that belt.
I'm going back to you, Gail, to talk about these next series of fights that took place on DAZN. Start with the main event here. Devin Haney fighting Antonio Moran. Moran gave Jose Pedraza, who fought on the undercard of Ito here. We're not going to talk about him tonight because we have so many fights to discuss. Moran gave Pedraza a really good fight, tough go. And against Haney, here's the thing, Gail. I was looking for a really, really showcase, show-stopping performance for Haney. We know he's fast. We know he's talented. We know he's skilled. We know he can box. But for me, I wanted to see a fight in which he didn't just win, but win by emphatic fashion. And I finally got it in this fight. Not only did he control the pace, outbox Moran throughout, but the way he ended the fight in the 7th round, I believe, with that right hand, that's what I want to see from a young kid on the come up. Your reaction?
Haney's still very young. We expect a lot from him. He's 20 years old. And I think because he presents himself as so put together, so mature, he is so mature, he's so thoughtful outside the ring. He's already set up his own promotion company. And now he's signed a co-promotion deal with Matchroom to let Eddie Hearn and company do the heavy lifting, because I think he found out, it's kind of hard to run your boxing career and, oh, by the way, run the company at the same time. So while he's ascending in the ranks, he's going to, take a little bit of a backseat on the business side, which was very smart. So in the meantime, he's juggling all that stuff, and he's starting to mature in the ring, starting to get his man strength under him. In his early days, he had some pretty great knockouts, but consider the opposition. Now that he's tackling a little bit tougher opponents, his last few fights, have not exactly been showstoppers. So he was far improved on Saturday, far improved. Was it a blockbuster wow performance? It was a very good, solid performance. He showed some power, which he needed to do. It was far from a blowout. But hey, Moran was not a soft touch. So I was perfectly satisfied. I think he's showing progress, very steady, reasonable progress. And, to expect any more than that, I'm not sure that's fair. And that's a lot to put on his shoulders, especially at 20 years old.
I'm going to you, Gus. Impressed? Was it what you expected, or you were like, yeah?
Haven't seen the fight, Mike.
Okay.
Watching the ESPN broadcast, but I was going to sit down and watch the fight today, but
okay. Were you able to watch the Hunter fight on the undercard?
Yeah.
Oh, let's go there then.
All that few minutes, I'm glad you could spare that time.
let's go there with
fight too. It was hard to find time to get both those heavyweight fights in.
Yeah, let's go there with Hunter, Gus. He fought Fabio Maldanado. Hunter moving up to heavyweight. Look, he fought Usyk a few years back, and he gave Usyk a very good go at cruiserweight. I'm watching this, and I'm watching the progression as a heavyweight. And okay, I'm hearing Usyk giving all this fanfare moving up to heavyweight, and fair enough, understood. But I'm watching this Maldonado kid. I'm watching this, not Maldonado, I'm watching Michael Hunter. He has adequate size. He has a really good skill set. Outstanding. He's athletic and knows how to use his athleticism. For me, I'm watching this and I'm saying to myself, Gus, I want to see Hunter and Usyk again at heavyweight. And if they fight again, I wouldn't make Usyk such the dominant favorite here. Your thoughts?
Mike, when I spoke with Mr. Bashir, he still holds Michael Hunter in very high esteem. Even despite the two of them sort of departing, but he's actually very high on him, and he feels he can do a lot of damage in the heavyweight ranks. And I agree with him. He's had 3 excellent performances now. Maldanado, the Brazilian, was a fighter who had a very high knockout ratio when he was fighting bums. But when he stepped up, he fought another Ukrainian, Teleshenko, and Oscar Rivas, and lost those 2 fights. They went on points, but he showed a great deal of toughness in all of the fights. He'd never really been rocked, knocked down, etc. So tough, durable, and that was what Eddie Hearn was hoping for, to give Hunter a few rounds, showcase his skills. But as I mentioned, Mike, on the chat, a mobile heavyweight, I think, is one of the most important factors in this current era, given that the top of the sort of heavyweight, food chain is dominated by behemoths. So movement, I think, is going to be even more important to sort of when he's up against some of these behemoths, because they're going to be a little bit too flat-footed, whereas he has the movement, and that's how he gave Usyk the trouble in the first part. His movement, hitting Usyk to the body, getting out of dodge, not allowing Usyk to even measure the distance with his jab, couldn't even get him with his left hand until eventually Usyk decided, look, how am I going to deal with this tricky sort of movement? Is to try and walk him down and try and increase my volume of punches to try and suffocate him, negate his movement and slow him down ultimately, and then trap him and just sort of unload. So Usyk worked out the puzzle finally, and that victory is just looking better and better because he's beaten much bigger heavyweights. He's beaten some heavyweights who were touted for greatness, in like Marin Bakoli, who was a fantastic sparring partner against against Joshua and whatever. People were speaking very highly of him as a future world champion, but he managed to expose their deficiencies, their flat-footedness, and the power looks like it's definitely carrying up as well, Mike. He's got good power. He's got a very good jab, and he's got an even better jab to the pit of the stomach, which I think he uses well to slow down the opponents. The athletic ability you mentioned, his movement, his angles, forcing these flat-footed fighters to keep resetting, who are just loading up on their punches. He gets out of the way, comes straight back. He's got that youth. Straight back with that 1-2, bang, right hand to the body, comes up with the overhand right, throws a weird right hand at times. He sort of loops, he sort of hooks it even more around the corner to get around the guard as well. And that's what did it for Maldonado. So, I was impressed with him as an amateur, Mike. He was very good back then. He gave Beterbiev and that a hell of a fight. So the talent has always been there, although he may not have been the most popular out of all of the US squad. So he's gone very quietly under the radar. But he definitely a serious heavyweight contender. An Usyk rematch at some point, absolutely, I would welcome that. But I think he can be very competitive, even up against Joshua, Wilder, and even Fury, Mike.
I'll go to you, Gail. Maybe I'm being prisoner of the moment here. I don't know, but I'm saying if we're going to give Usyk the credit for what he's done and the problems that he can pose at heavyweight against these, to quote Gus, these behemoths, I'm looking at Hunter and his skill set, and I'm thinking to myself, he can do very well the same thing.
I absolutely agree. I look at Michael Hunter and I think he can do what we always hoped Bryant Jennings could do and never got there. He has all the tools. He seems to have a good head on his shoulders. For as good a record as Maldonado had, taking a look at him, I mean, he makes Andy Ruiz Jr. look chiseled. I gotta say, it was ugly.
Yeah, we'll talk about Ruiz later and his weight.
Yeah, but Hunter did take care of business and then some, and that's what you want to do to get people's attention. When you've got the chance to have eyes turn your way, that's when the pressure is on to produce. And he did. So I'd love to see what he can do. There's a lot of second tier guys he can test himself against for quite a long time, working his way up the ranks. And meanwhile, you're going to see Usyk, recover from his bicep injury and get back in there and test himself at heavyweight. I don't think it's a rematch we'll see right away. Both of them, Usyk actually needs more heavyweight fights probably than Hunter does. Hunter's gotten a little head start on him, but wouldn't you love to see those two circle around eventually one day? And they seem like the kind of guys who will eagerly embrace that rematch. And that's a fight well worth looking forward to. That's a hardcore fans fight. So I think we'll get it. Oh, maybe late next year at the earliest.
I mean, it's all set up. Both are on the zone, I believe.
Totally a makeable fight. It's in fact an extremely easy fight to make. Yeah, it's perfect.
One final card here. One final fight on the DAZN card. Jessica McCaskill fighting Anahi Esther Sanchez. Unification bout at 140 pounds. WBC, WBA. McCaskill won. For anybody who watched the fight, please talk about it. The thing I will say is, one, may not have been the most aesthetically pleasing fight from a skill perspective, but these ladies, they went hardcore. They didn't hold nothing back. They both threw hard punches. Neither lady relented. Look, McCaskill got the decision 90, but I didn't agree with the scorecards, just like Gus didn't agree with the scorecards on the Herring fight at his win over Ito. I didn't agree with the scorecards here. 99-91, 96-94, 98-92. The 99-91 and the 98-92 in particular, no. She may have won, but she didn't win by that wide of margin. And even McCaskill said so after the fight, saying that she doesn't like she didn't like it, and she thought it was unfair to Sanchez. So for anybody who saw it, some commentary on that, please.
Yeah, both ladies gave it their all. Was it elegant? No. No. But we've had plenty of messy men's fights of that nature, and enjoyed them just as much. So it was a bang fest. They went for it. In fact, they several times more or less leaned on each other because later in the fight they were so damn tired out they had to get a second win and a third win. There was a little bloody at times, but it's a fight, and they went into it with the idea that it's going to be a fight. If I want this, I got to give it everything I've got. And there was no doubt every bit of effort was made throughout. To her credit, McCaskill said after the fight, those cards were way too wide. That's not right. Even though she won, which I think was a nod of respect to her opponent Sanchez, and good for her. And she is right. Those cards were way too wide. For the record, the 118 card score for Herring was also ridiculous. It was a much closer fight than that. And Herring gets more credit for winning that close fight and having to work that much harder. So, there's really no point handing out a little gimme card like that. It's plain silly. But good for McCaskill, and that was only her 9th professional fight. So that's an impressive achievement for her. She's got several losses on her record, but to her credit, learning occurred in those losses. And that's what makes the difference. A lot of times someone can progress much faster and much further from losses than, fighting a bunch of cab drivers just to get a 15-0 record. McCaskill's a perfect example of that. I think she was 6-2, 6-3 coming into this fight. And so that record, you think, well, okay, that doesn't look that impressive. But in the end, she's a much better fighter for it than someone coming in 11-0 with no appreciable opposition. So we have to get used to looking at those kind of records in women's boxing, because they've got to tangle with each other because at this level, they have fewer choices of opponents. So if they want to fight, they're forced to fight everyone else at their level because there just aren't that many. They can't avoid each other. And that is what's good for women's boxing.
One final fight we're going to talk about. I was going to talk about the Austin Trout Terrell Gausha fight, but Gus, when we was discussing some fight, he was like, "No, why?" So I'm going to skip.
An ugly discussion. Let's face it. Our mothers told us if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. Okay.
So we're going to skip that, and I'm going to China here. Going to China, and I'm going to 108 pounds. And to a fighter by the name of Carlos Canizales. We've talked about flyweight champion Koisei Tanaka. The fighter he beat for that flyweight title was a guy by the name of Sho Kimura. Well, Kimura was the opponent for Carlos Canizales, and Kimura moving down from 112 to 108 pounds. And we going to you, Gus. We discussed this fight a little bit on Skype leading up to it, and in watching this, Canizales, he is good. He is very good. I loved his movement. This dude has energy for days. 12 rounds, and he didn't seem to get tired 1 second. Very good jab. He can double and triple with the jab. He can go to the head and body with equal effect. And it can be argued that he beats Kimura as impressive as Koisei Tanaka did. And Tanaka is starting to get a rep and praise as one of the best fighters in the world, pound for pound. So let's talk about this, and let's have a bit of a further conversation about 108 pounds junior flyweight, which, if for those who pay attention to the smaller weight fighters, this division is loaded.
It's the deepest and the most exciting weight division in boxing. I've already made a video on this in the past. Just go over to my channel and I will articulate the reasons for it. Now, this fight, Mike, I was massively excited. I didn't even realize that the fight was actually on until very late on. Canizales is a guy I've rated for the best part of 2-3 years now. And I was surprised when the bookmakers had instilled Sho Kimura as the favorites. He was the favorite 4-11. Canizales, the defending sort of WBA regular champion, fighting at his natural weight. He was 2-1, and then I took him at 5-2 to win on points, Mike. So I came away with a nice, large 4-figure sum. So I was very happy. Got to thank you for your little bit of information to remind me that Kimura was obviously coming down in weight. So I promise I'll make a donation.
Appreciate it. I
would definitely do that. But let's talk about the fight now. Sho Kimura, the Japanese fighter, he's a very difficult fighter for anybody at either junior flyweight or flyweight. Now, he's physically very conditioned, very well-trained athlete. You could see he was the much bigger man in the ring. Now, coming down in weight, okay, he came off a defeat, but he was up against a fighter, Koisei Tanaka, who we all like here, and I certainly feel Tanaka is worthy of a pound-for-pound top 10 fighter, in my humble opinion. So there was no shame in that defeat. It was one of the best fights of the year. Now, he's a very difficult fighter because he likes to march relentlessly forward. He's got his chin tucked down behind a high, heavy guard. He's not offering a lot of angles. He just wants to pretty much march you down, and he wants to detonate power punches. That's his modus operandi. So for Canizales, it was a difficult task. Defensively, he had to be very good. He couldn't stand there and trade with the much bigger man who was firing mean power punches, feinting with his lead hand, coming back with that left hand to the body, with the right hand to the body and the right hand up top. So he's a combination puncher as well. Not a lot of jabs, set up range distance. He just wants to come pretty much right in your face. So Canizales was on the back foot a lot of the times, but he was very good in his movements. But what I liked was that he was varying his arsenal of attacks, realizing that, Kimura was feinting with that jab and coming back with that left hand to the body. So he would immediately fire that right hand over the top. It would catch Kimura. But then when Kimura would try and come back with that same combination, he'd have it pretty much scouted. But then Canizares would actually fire 1, 2, 3 jabs, shift to the left to take that left hook out of the equation. So Kimura would have to just keep resetting and coming forward. So he showed amazing ability, his lateral movements and his footwork, very good. He knows just exactly how long to engage with somebody, not overcompensating for the fact that he could get actually hurt in the pocket, kept his fundamentals right. Eventually, as it became pretty much of an attritional sort of fight, Mike. What I don't like with Canizales is that eventually his right hand begins to drop. And I felt Kimura started coming back a little bit in some of the sort of mid to late rounds. I don't think it was a one fighter dominating the fight throughout. I thought it was still competitive throughout.
I did.
There were some nasty
I
head
did.
clashes as well.
In subtle ways, I did. From mid rounds on, Kimura was forever trying, but Canizales, he stayed ahead throughout. He could see what Kimura was doing, and he neutralized, in my opinion, he began to neutralize everything Kimura did and anything he was thinking of trying to do.
Kimura just might, he didn't look the same with that second head clash that occurred, that nasty one. He definitely looked like he was buzzed up a little bit discombobulated as well. And he just didn't look right after that at all. I don't know whether that was a significant factor in the fight. I don't think so. I think it was some of the body shots that were slowing him down as well.
Yes.
But yeah, the body shots were definitely having an effect. Certainly that right hand, to the sternum, that was working very well. Because Kimura, he was trying that uppercut as well. So I think Canizares was wise using that right hand to the body to get, underneath his elbows, and I think that was definitely having some impact. The same thing that Tanaka was doing as well, working that body. But Kimura's power definitely carries late on in the fight, so he was never really out of the fight. But Canizares, yet another, magnificent display. He really has gone under the radar, not getting a lot of shine. So it was nice for him to fight, in China, in front of a sort of a bigger crowd as well. Showcasing his talents. Um, you know, some of the fights that I'm sure we'll talk about, in the future, sort of mouthwatering.
Indeed. With Canizales Gale, with Koiguchi, who also has a kind of a WBA belt. I think he may have the either the regular or the world. I can't remember. With Kenshiro, WBC champion, Alvarado, IBF, Angel Acosta, who also lost to Tanaka, but one of the hardest punchers in all of division, all of boxing. And if I'm the World Boxing Super Series, given the tournaments at bantamweight, given the tournament right now at junior welterweight, super lightweight, it depends on how you want to call it division. With what we just saw at super middle, if I'm that org, I'm seriously thinking about having a light flyweight tournament sometime in 2020. So your thoughts on the fights, Gail, Canizales' win over Kimura, and your reaction to my proposal of a possible tournament at light flyweight.
It was an enjoyable fight to watch. It was clean. It was well paced. Both guys had a chance right to the end, but Canizales put on a great performance. And You know, he's a Venezuelan fighter going into the Lion's Den in China. So, you know, that was a bold move on his part, and good for him for getting that win. And he remains undefeated. And for those who wonder where they can take a look at it, go to the ringtv.com website. This was a fight that was a card co-promoted by Golden Boy. So it was live streamed via Ring TV, and I believe the recorded feed is still there. So well worth looking at, and really nicely produced. Gus and I were talking about how enjoyable it was to watch that entire card. It was just so well done. I think a tournament, especially if the first couple of rounds and perhaps the finals, depending on who gets there, were held in Japan, makes enormous sense. Your guys at the top of the food chain are Japanese fighters. They know these guys in the division. The rest of the talent is, I'm sure, willing to fight there. They draw very well in Japan. It's just the right place to do it. And because one of the most exciting of the tournaments this year is likely to be won by a Japanese fighter, the monster himself, Naoya Inoue, I think it tees up a 2020 edition in this division very, very nicely. If they will all engage. But I think in the lower weight divisions, they are more willing to engage. You know, they just don't get the spotlight. We talk about it all the time. We're champions here at the Pound for Pound report of the lower weight divisions getting a little love. So imagine if you get Shiro, Kayaguchi, Acosta, Canizales, you throw in, hey, you give Kimura another chance. You put Heike Butler in there.
Fighter by the name of Hisada, Japanese fighter by the name of Hisada, who's ranked #1 by the BA and the BO.
Yeah, you know, maybe you get Felix Alvarado in there, and you know, and if you balance it, you could almost have half Japanese fighters and half Central American fighters, with the exception of Butler kind of being the odd guy out. And that would make for a very interesting 8-man tournament. Sign me up.
Indeed. So yeah, I wanted to mention that, no offense to Trout and Gausha. One, I hadn't seen all the fight, and from all indications and from what I've been told, it was kind of a snoozer, and it's basically time for Austin Trout to retire.
If you're lucky, there's going to be a rematch.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
That was Mike's polite euphemism for fucking garbage.
And it's such a busy fight weekend with lots of great choices and interesting fights on three major cards available to watch in the United States. And that's not even counting the card in China. There was no reason to waste your time on it. Sometimes you watch a fight like this when it's the only port in a storm, as they like to say, but no.
Yeah, indeed. Let's move on to some news. Get on to the news segment of the show. News broke that Deontay Wilder, who we know is you're not going to see the Joshua fight for a while. Wilder basically has his schedule set up. I got some breaking news regarding that schedule. First fight on his future plans is a rematch with Luis Ortiz. Your thoughts on the rematch against Ortiz? Personally, you know how I feel. I want to see Wilder versus Dillian Whyte, because I feel Dillian Whyte has earned the opportunity. It's not going to happen. Probably will not happen ever. But again, thoughts on Wilder Ortiz rematch?
Could we all just put up a heavy sigh sound effect and leave it at that?
I would rather watch Austin Trout and Terrell Gausha in the rematch than this garbage.
I don't know if I go quite that far, but
yeah, I'm not going that far either.
What does Dillian Whyte have to do to get somebody to give him a decent fight.
I'm just saying it's a damn shame what not just the WBC but what all these organizations are doing to Dillian White. It's a damn shame.
I don't, what did he do to these guys? I mean, really, what did he do? It's just flat out ridiculous. And of course, along with the news of this Wilder Ortiz rematch, we had the the news delivered with this huge fanfare that Matchroom had signed Joseph Parker. Oh, so we're going to get another few time-wasting fights, championship fights, because now you have Parker in the mix again. Oh, yeah, Dillian White. It's unfathomable to me. Everyone wants to see him in action. Doesn't even matter. Pick any of the three major opponents. And White will deliver a terrific match with any of them. He's dangerous, but I'm not sure he's that dangerous unless Joshua's really that afraid to fight him, and the other two are too. I mean, it perplexes me that there is a sanctioning organization that won't force this fight.
My sources are telling me that Tyson Fury and Dillian White have signed to fight.
I hope so. I hope that.
I got some news on that. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, good. And my respect to Fury for getting that fight made. And I'm sure that's going to be, I assume that will be in the UK. It'll be a huge draw, if so. Although if Fury is still trying to build a fan base in the United States and he brings that fight here, that makes me very happy. I'd love to see them.
In terms of what happens after this fight with Ortiz, popular opinion early on was that that Fury was going to fight Dillian White, but I've been hearing that news has been popping off over the last few hours that should Deontay Wilder win against Ortiz, he's going to fight a rematch against Fury. Your thoughts?
I can't see that happening.
Have you heard anything about that, Gail?
I have not heard about that. I imagine news will get out about where all the next set of musical chairs stop once we have the fight this Saturday, and then once we see the Fury Schwartz fight in 2 more weeks. Then everybody will have, all the major players will have been in action over the last couple months in the heavyweight division, and everybody's going to have to figure out who their dance partners are and announce that.
Mike, Gail, Bob Arum and ESPN made it explicitly clear the only way Tyson Fury fights Deontay Wilder is if it's on joint networks, ESPN and Showtime. That is it. They're not willing to compromise or give him dispensation to fight on any network on a solitary basis. It has to be dual or ESPN outright, period. So
we have to remember, though, that Wilder is not beholden to anybody. Yes,
correct.
He's allied with Showtime, but he is not contracted long-term with Showtime. So, and he has purposely not contracted with Showtime, as we know. They dangled a fairly nice contract in front of him for 3 fights, and he declined. So this is not necessarily an impediment as long as Arum offers him decent money. If he wants it on ESPN, if he wants it on ESPN Plus or ESPN pay-per-view, as long as he pays Wilder what he thinks he deserves, that fight's makeable. But of course, that means Wilder wants the money he thinks he deserves. So we know that there have been a lot of outrageous demands in the heavyweight division for big money. So we'll see. But I don't necessarily think the Showtime issue is the impediment. The money issue is the impediment.
Gail voiced her displeasure at Joseph Parker signing a deal with Matchroom News of that broke today. I'm going to give you an opportunity, Gus, to respond to that. My question is, what has Parker earned? What has Parker done to earn a deal with Matchroom?
Mike, I couldn't give a fuck about Joseph Parker, a D-level fighter.
Thank you very much. Good.
I'll tell you something very interesting, Mike, about if you physically look at Joseph Parker before the Dimitrenko fight, when he was doing absolutely no drug testing, look at the side of his shoulders and his trapezius, and then look at him post when he started doing testing, and you'll see his body shape just drastically deteriorate and change. That's all I'll say.
Just gonna go through some rumors here. Early rumors are that Julian Williams, J-Rock, who a couple weeks back defeated Jared Hurd, very impressive performance to win the junior middleweight belts. Early rumors I'm hearing is that they will go for the straight rematch in November in Philadelphia. Your reaction to that, Gail and Gus? If it happens, I applaud J-Rock for what he's doing. He's showing that he's a fighter's fighter. Taking a rematch with Hurd when he really doesn't have to.
Well, both Williams and Hurd are very classy guys. They truly respect each other. There's no animosity. They, they seem to have a very respectful relationship, and it's extending to the point that they're willing to give each other a rematch. And really, if J-Rock firmly believes, and he does, and I've heard him talking about the fight, he firmly believes that he was well prepared. It was no surprise to him. He knew he could do it. He doesn't think Hurd can adjust, and he thinks he can do it again. And rematches are by far more fun when they come along, back to back with each other. I would be a little surprised if there isn't a tune-up fight for both of them in between. But if they really want to get back in the ring with each other right away and get it done, good for them. And of course, what Williams really wants is a Charlo fight. So
yeah.
But that's not going to happen right away. So if with that, with the calendar tied up there, it really does make sense for Williams to make sure he can capitalize on all the attention he's getting for beating Hurd by going right back in with him.
I'm going to you, Gus. Ray Vargas set to defend his title next against Tomoki Kameda, July 13th. Your reaction?
Ray Vargas is one of those fighters that we talked about with Miguel Berchelt as well, Mike, who his performances have not impressed since winning, the championship against Gavin McDonald, where it was a good performance, but you've got to look at the opposition as well. He's struggled in subsequent fights to the point in which it looks like pretty much any of the other champions can probably see that as a soft touch in terms of fighting him. Doesn't look that disciplined out of the ring either. Up against Kameda, not really an exciting fight, Mike. Given that how bad Vargas has looked, you could certainly think that Kameda definitely has a chance of defeating him, even though he's pretty washed up as well. So all in all, Mike, not really an exciting fight. I'm hoping that Ray can certainly make some changes. He's talked about making some changes now, moving trainer, actually moving location. maybe training in the United States is what I heard he was talking about in Vegas, I think. So I think that would be a positive move. Anybody who can, certainly identify that there are some problems there and is willing to address them, then I have respect for those fighters. So if he does implement them changes, then I would definitely welcome the match, Mike. Otherwise, not really a fight that really gets me that excited.
One more fight, and I'll go to both of you on this one that may get you a little bit more excited. Nothing's confirmed, but I'm hearing from various sources that German Ancañas, super flyweight champion in the IBF, his next fight will be in September against Andrew Maloney, the brother of Jason Maloney. Andrew Maloney at 115 pounds. The Maloney brothers from Australia are both very, very good. If this fight happens, could it be argued this is the toughest defense for Ancañas?
Which Maloney was it who fought Rodriguez?
Jason.
That was Jason. Okay. Andrew Maloney. I don't think I've seen too much of him, Mike.
You can find his fights on YouTube. I want to say he's 19-0. Fights very much like his brother. Very much the very same style. Both boxer punchers. Both go to the body well. I don't know if you've seen much of him, Gail, but from what I've seen of him, if this fight happens, I give Ancañas credit for taking this fight. If you've seen Maloney fight, your thoughts?
I have not seen them. I have read about them. I've read a lot about them from people who have seen them. Given who Ancajas has faced, I think that's possible, that it could be his toughest test to date. He, on his record, Joe Arroyo, gave him a pretty good go in the Philippines here a few years ago. But Jonas Sultan was a blowout, but at least it went the distance. His fight against Barrios in Oakland, those cards were all over the place. That was a really strange split decision last September. So, yeah, I think that might be. And I don't know a lot about the style of these guys, but it could be an issue of a style problem if they give him a problem. The Maloneys are orthodox fighters, correct? Because Ancajas is a southpaw. So yeah. And that always makes it a little bit more interesting, frankly. So Ancajas, everyone has always thought he was going to really set the world on fire. And while he's, certainly got a good record, he's, among the stronger fighters in the super flyweight division, but he's never really reached the potential a lot of people imagined. And unfortunately, small Filipino fighters are inevitably compared to Manny Pacquiao. It's not fair, but it's inevitably done. And he simply can't live up to that. He does not have that kind of skill.
If Andrew fights like his brother Jamie Maloney, then that's a very difficult style for Ancajas.
Yeah, that's what I'm surmising. I'm glad to hear you confirm that. So,
because he's the boxer puncher. He's a boxer puncher who needs space definitely and he likes to exit off, and he doesn't like that sort of counter coming back to his body, circling him around, putting pressure on him, restricting his space. If Maloney does that and targets his body, and he's able to take Ancajas' power, because Ancajas definitely hits hard to the body. If you can take those punches and suffocate him and just brawl him in the second half of the fight, outwork him, then he's got a great shot.
or pivot away from those body punches entirely.
One last bit of news here before we start previewing fights. Your reaction to Hearn from Matchroom having some interest in signing Josh Taylor to a co-promotional deal. Now, keep in mind, Taylor is getting ready to fight Progress in the World Boxing Super Series, super lightweight final, going to fight Progress. But your thoughts on Hearn having interest in signing Taylor, who's one of the better prospects. Well, he's a contender now over in the UK. Champion now. You're right. Champion, IBF champion. He just beat Moran. So yeah, thoughts on Hearn having interest in signing Josh Taylor, who is currently with Cyclone Promotions, I believe. So it will be a co-promotional deal.
Well, of course, he wants to swoop in and get a little piece of that World Boxing Super Series, title. I mean, it seems it's sort of funny. He sees Taylor getting this showcase fight, a fight I think he's going to lose, frankly, but that's not a given. I guess he wants to roll the dice, because if Taylor does win, an upset, I'm sure Hearn would love to have a piece of that. And he's kind of willing to gamble on it.
Your reaction, Gus?
To me, Mike, it's just logical interest. He's one of the best, most exciting fighters around, certainly in the United Kingdom, but arguably in the world. And he's got a lot of upsize and equity and value. Now, if you look at the World Boxing Super Series, promotionally, it hasn't done well because of where the fights have been staged. But up in the Hydro Arena in Scotland, Josh managed to sell out at least 7,000. So there's definitely return on him as well from an investment point. But Eddie Hearn knows that Josh Taylor is now struggling at 140. So the natural transition is in 147. And we know that's a blue ribbon event in terms of the fighters and the amount of money that can be made in that division. So earn with Hearn, as they say. So both of them can make a tremendous amount of money. So we know Eddie's all about the Benjamins. So the logical step.
Yes, indeed.
Well, what's the discussion with Gary Russell?
He's gonna Russell has to make a move.
Russell absolutely has to make a move. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Yeah.
And look, I know a lot of the featherweights are on with Showtime, but he's sitting there wasting opportunities here. Basically being signed by no one, being a free agent. You got Warrington there. Could possibly make a fight with him. There are other opportunities, maybe Farmer up at 130. He could maybe make a deal to fight Tank Davis, because I don't know of any bad relationship between Matchroom and Mayweather Promotion. So he has to do something. He has to do something. He's too talented to be sitting back wasting his time fighting once a year. While I know Santa Cruz is not making any moves here, but he's at least making money, $1 million a fight. So something has to be done on his behalf.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's move on to some future preview, some fights here. Going to have both you, Gail, and Gus talk about Joshua and Ruiz, and then I'm going to split the rest of these fights up. So, look, Anthony Joshua, he was supposed to fight Big Baby Miller. Big Baby Miller tested positive for not two, but 3 banned substances all at the same time. Andy Ruiz basically Twitter talked his way into a fight. And so here we go. They're going to fight tomorrow night at MSG in New York City. Pretty sizable buzz heading into the fight. The Brits have shown up. You've seen Joshua all over various U.S. television outlets. Now let's get down to the fight itself. I thought Ruiz, Gus, would have a halfway decent opportunity because he has quick hands and he's good counterpunching, particularly mid-range in. Then I saw the weigh-in and I saw how much he weighed. 268 pounds, the highest of his career. Um, I know there's some issues with Joshua. He had a little bit of facial damage over, I think, his left eye. Looked like he may have had some damage on his nose as well. May have had a rough camp, but I'm concerned with Ruiz's weight, Gus. I don't think he can move at that size. Yes, he has quick hands, but he has to have some movement, or else he's going to be right there, straight front and back in the middle. And Joshua can just, for me, use a Lennox Lewis effect style, establish the jab, establish reach, single jabs, double jab, just step around enough and just keep the fight mid range out. And I just don't see Ruiz having a chance here. He's tough. He'll go some rounds, but Joshua will win, in my opinion, and will win easily because I don't think Ruiz is in good shape at all.
It's one of those fights, Mike, where if people just place too much emphasis on the aesthetics and what Ruiz looks like, and he's flab rolling and jiggling around up against somebody who's so defined and impeccable sort of conditioning like Joshua, um, they'd think that this is just a complete mismatch, or why the hell is this fight even happening? But the Ruiz has always been like that, Mike. Now, I speak with a Mexican cat, Gonzalo, regularly on a podcast, who has spent some time over there with friends of Ruiz over in Mexico, and he says to me that Ruiz has an outstanding chin, which people really haven't seen. Now, as an amateur, he was very good, Mike. I think he'd only lost like 5 fights, and he fought some very good heavyweights as well. Never been dropped, never even really been rocked. They say amateur or professional. So they say he has a very good chin, but we all know that's relative in given that the level of opposition you faced. Now, on the one hand, his weight is high, but he has been in back-to-back camps, which is a good thing. So he shouldn't have any ring rust. He just come off fighting a 6 feet 6 inch, I think it was Dimitrenko. Um, so that's reasonable preparation in terms of height, certainly for. And Joshua, we know, does not relish fighting small heavyweights, Mike. He never has. I think what Joshua's going to do in this fight, Mike, he's going to drop his left hand like he did in Povetkin to try and lure Ruiz in, who has a significant disadvantage with his reach in particular. I think it might be about 8 inches or something, 74 and 82, if I'm not mistaken. 6'2" versus 6'6" on the height. So the issue is going to be is how does Ruiz navigate, get around, slip, avoid Joshua's jab, certainly from long distance, because if you look at Joshua carefully, he doesn't utilize double jabs that much. That's because his feet are planted and he throws a very heavy, debilitating jab following up with a straight right hand. So his objective is to do damage from long range, to try and break you down as much as possible. Now, Joshua can get a little bit predictable at long range, and that was something what Joseph Parker was able to exploit through his negativity, which I don't think Ruiz will do, because we saw that when they fought. So if he seems to think that he can take advantage at short range, well, that might not be the wise strategy as well, because a lot of Joshua's offensive ability and the damage he's done in pretty much all of his fights. If you look at the Vladimir Klitschko fight, the Carlos Takam, the Povetkin fight, he does his best damage at short range. He's actually very good on the inside as well. He's able to, hook particularly well at that sort of distance for somebody with that sort of height and reach. So Ruiz is going to have difficulty not only at long range, but he's going to have difficulties at short range as well. So, but the advantage Ruiz does have, I think he's the better counter puncher. I think he's got the better hand speed as well. But the big question is going to be is how well does he take Joshua's power? because Joshua is not one-dimensional. As we mentioned, he can fight at different ranges, and he can make that adjustment like he did against Povetkin, where he was having a great deal of trouble early on with Povetkin's movement and his combination punching. So he decided to try and, lure him in, drop that left hand, become a lot more looser, more flexible, so he wasn't telegraphing his punches at long range. So it shows a fighter who has slowly developed, and he developed certainly that check hook with his left hand as well. But eventually it was that straight punch which caught Povetkin, which he disguised very well. So that's what I think is going to happen in this fight. I think Ruiz is going to be very competitive early on. He's going to have a little bit of success here and there. But I think eventually Joshua will start breaking him down. And I would think that he probably stops him late, somewhere between 7 to 12, Mike.
Yeah, it's not just the check hook you talk about. Now go to you, Gail. For me, it's the uppercut. Because of the height and reach, Ruiz is going to have to try to find a way to combat that and get close to him. And when he does, I think it's the left hook and particularly the right uppercut of Joshua fought behind the jab. I think is going to be there for him again. I know I'm not mad at the flab. I'm mad at the weight in the flab. If he had the flab and he was in the 230s, 240s, okay, cool. I'll give him a better chance because he will be able to not just move his feet, but his upper body, not just back and forth, but side to side in angles. At this weight, I don't know. He's going to have to make an adjustment.
What was his weight for the Dimitrenko fight? Does anybody recall?
So he was at 262 for the Dimitrenko fight. He is only up 6 pounds from that fight. Ruiz has never fought below 245 ever. He's mainly fought in the 250s for his entire career. I'm looking back through his record. He's fought as high as 270. Well, actually, he had a fight at 292 and a half.
There you go, Mike.
Well, even worse. His very first professional fight, fittingly in the Plaza de Toros, the bull ring in Tijuana, he weighed 297 and a half.
But what was his weight for the Parker fight though? So he was in the 250s.
Yeah, he was he was at 255 and 3/4 for that fight. He was at 262 for Dimitrenko, 250 or 262 for Dimitrenko, 252 for Kevin Johnson. When you're that size, 6 pounds is just proportionately, percentage-wise, not that much more. When you're a flyweight, 6 pounds, is a lot. When you weigh 260, what's another 6 pounds? I mean, doesn't make a damn bit of difference. And whether he's blowing smoke or not, Ruiz claims it was absolutely on purpose. He wants to muscle Joshua. He wanted to be big in there. And if you've watched him doing workouts or, his media workout in New York, you've watched a video of him, he moves that weight around surprisingly well, considering how big he is. Yes, there's just an incredible contrast between his physique and Joshua. But as he says, hey, this is not a beauty contest. I'm not a bodybuilder. That's not what I'm there for. He's trained by Manny Robles. Robles is an excellent trainer. It's a good relationship. He's going to have to come out quickly. He's going to have to take some risks. But he is the most dangerous kind of opponent. He absolutely has nothing to lose. Nothing. And he can go for broke if he wants to. Why not? And that really is his best way of potentially getting lucky. I think the longer the fight goes, obviously it's diminishing returns for Ruiz. He'll earn enormous respect if he goes distance, especially if he ends the fight on his feet. And for anyone who watched him fighting Parker, a fight that people were absolutely positive he was going to get blown up in, absolutely blown out, he lost the decision. Many observers, including me, thought he got robbed. So it's an intriguing fight. Frankly, I think we got a better fight than we might have against Miller. And there's one thing you can absolutely say for sure. Looking at Ruiz, you can be pretty darn sure he's never taken any steroids or any performance enhancing drugs. I think his worst drug of choice is Snickers candy bars. That's about it.
Yeah. I'm going to split these fights up here.
Mike, very quickly though.
Mm-hmm.
The one question now, correct me if I'm wrong, Ruiz, yeah, he's a PBC fighter, yeah?
No, he's a top ranked fighter.
He's top ranked. Okay, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Ignore. I cancel what I was going to say.
Okay.
I thought he was a PBC fighter. Okay.
No. Going to split the rest of these fights up. Going to go back to you guys. Going Callum Smith making the first defense of his BA super middleweight title against Hassan Dom. I look at this fight and I just think that one, Ndam doesn't have the chin. Two, Ndam is known for his skill and his jab. Well, he's facing a guy with a better jab. Not only who has a better jab, but is physically bigger. I mean, you saw him at the weigh-in. This dude towers over Ndam, who has good height at himself at 6 foot. How Callum Smith makes 168 pounds, I will never know. But in this fight, I just think he's just too big, too strong, and has too much of a jab for Ndam to deal with. I see knockout here. Your thoughts?
You know, Mike, people have been a little bit critical about as to how long it's taken Callum to get back into the ring following his victory over George Groves, but what they don't realize is that he's just become a father, so hence why he's had he's had a period certainly away and obviously with his family, which is understandable. But there has been some negativity in his talk. He's already talking about retirement, Mike. And we know that syndrome, George Groves had the same, and Carl Frampton, all of these fighters who start contemplating retirement at some point. They certainly end up with a defeat. So that's the one worry. But up against Hassan, who's moving up from middleweight to super middle, he's got no business being at super middleweight, I don't think. But Callum Smith's performances have been indifferent, Mike. Some performances he's put on, excellent performances, but some performances, up against Nicky Haskins and that, etc., against Eric Skogland, he was very lucky to actually have won that fight. He was getting outboxed, and had it not been for the knockdown, I think Eric Skogland would have been the victor in that fight, but eventually his power got him out of trouble. So very odd fighter, Mike. I don't know whether it's fighting down to the level of his opposition or something, but there's a little bit of inconsistency there. But he's now on the pay-per-view. It's a massive card. He's had some time. He's gone back into the gym. He's tried to work on a few new aspects, as he was saying. So I expect him to put in an excellent performance. A very good jab, but he's a very good inside fighter as well. Up against Ndam, who I'm not sure whether he set the world record in terms of how many times he's gone down on the canvas, but he just sort of gets down, keeps coming back up, knocked down. So it's more a question, Mike. I'm trying to put on the bet how many times he's going to hit the canvas in this fight. I'd say maybe 2-3 times, but I think he's going to get iced at some point. Maybe mid to late rounds. Back to you.
And I think, oh, there he is.
Okay, I'm back. Going to go to this next fight to you, Gail. we mentioned how unification has been the theme. We talked earlier in the show about McCaskill and Anaya Sanchez for unification at 140 pounds. Of course, we had Clarissa Shields, Christina Hammer, unification bout at a middleweight for all the belts. Well, we're going to have another unification undisputed bout at lightweight on the undercard of Joshua and Ruiz as Katie Taylor uh, defending her 3 belts, BO, BA, IBF against BC champion Delfine Persoon. I said I'm going to lean towards Persoon here in an upset. I just think height. She's speedy with her feet, especially. I think they may give Taylor some problems here, but I have some cause for pause because of Persoon's weight. She weighed in at what 130, 130 and a half. Um, did she come in too light, Gil?
I think she did come in too light. I think she's going to have all she can handle with Taylor and then some. Persoon weighed 130.6. Taylor weighed 134.6, so 4-pound difference. But, you got to make weight. They both made weight. We don't know how they'll rehydrate tomorrow. Taylor, has had I think fair to say, a meteoric rise since her Olympic gold medal. She's 13-0. She's got a fairly impressive knockout ratio for a women's fighter at six knockouts in her 13 fights. Persoon is far more experienced. Persoon has 44 professional fights, which is a tremendous number for a women's professional. She's been a professional for a decade. However, Persoon has not had any fights outside Europe, and she's only had one of those fights outside her native Belgium. And if you look down the list of her opponents, not exactly, even for the women's side of the game, not exactly household names. So, it's going to be interesting to find out exactly what Persoon's skill set really is. Yes, she's taller, and experience counts for a lot. It really does. When women struggle sometimes to find worthy opponents. So that's not necessarily Persoon's fault. I give her enormous credit for staying that busy for 10 years. But you do see she's fighting a lot of women who are, 9-7, 6-6, 9-1, 4 and you've got a lot of people in front of you who are glorified sparring sessions. Katie Taylor is nobody's sparring session. I always tell people who think they don't like women's boxing to watch Katie Taylor. It is not a slight. It is meant as a compliment to say that Taylor fights like a man. She punches like a man. She turns her hands over. She's extremely aggressive. I see her winning. Persoon may give her a good test, strictly based on her experience alone. She should be able to stay out of trouble, at least for some of the fight. But I think this is Taylor's for the taking. I really do.
Any quick word on this, Gus?
Yeah, I'm very interested in this fight, and I'm keen to get your feedback on sort of my observations on Delfine, as I gather you guys know far more now. I've watched obviously I'm thinking about this fight from a speculative perspective now. With Delfine now, what I like about her is one aspect of her defensive fundamentals. Now, as a combination puncher, she always brings her left hand back to obviously protect up against right hooks and straight right hands. Defensively, she'll always step back to get out of range of punches as well. But this is my problem with her. She's a 100% headhunter. In all of the fights I've seen, I've never even seen her target body at as an aggressive, he outworks Taylor because she's a high volume puncher, a combination puncher as well. But not a lot of angles to her work and not a lot of upper body movement as well. Not bad hand speed. Accuracy is not too bad as well, but there's not a great deal of punch variety I've seen as well. So I think Taylor is far more the skillful fighter, and I think Taylor will break her down to the body.
Some comments here in the chat. I was ignorant of what's going on in the chat. I want to thank Fink for joining us. I want to thank GM Strong in their commentary. Read a couple of comments from what they've been talking about in the chat. Talking Wilder Fury, he said that GM said Fury said he wouldn't fight Wilder after he said he will fight White for the WBC Diamond Belt. Fury playing mind tricks. He says that Fink in the chat is saying transitional boxing rankings has J-Rock versus her 2 for the lineal 154-pound title. So he in the chat, he's basically saying that the fight is all but made. Some further comments about J-Rock and Charlo rematch for the. He said J-Rock versus Charlo rematch for the mandatory spot at middleweight would be wild. I wouldn't mind seeing a rematch between those two, particularly how J-Rock is looking. I think Charlo may be still a little bit too big, but let me take that back. J-Rock is he's weighing 54, but he's coming into the ring at 168, 170, so he may not be big. Fink in the chat is saying that Naoya Inoue is a superstar waiting to happen. I agree with you on that one. We all do. He says,
yeah, times 3.
Yeah.
Right here.
Talked about 140. He says Ramirez. He's talked about the possibility of a Ramirez versus Ramirez at hooker at 140. Yeah. Who does Ramirez really want to fight at this point? Because he doesn't want none of Progress. He didn't want none of the World Boxing Super Series tournament and Hooker, you know, again, where he's going to go as well, particularly after his last fight, which he came in over a weight. He may move up to 147 pounds soon. He said, GM Song, he says, think about Povetkin when he fought Jab.
I'm hearing Ramirez and that fight is made, Mike. That's what I'm
Ramirez
hearing.
and Hooker? Interesting.
Yes, made.
In our discussion about Joshua and Ruiz, GM Strong commented, think about Povetkin fight when Joshua had the jab low, going to the body and the head. He also asked the question is, can he take Joshua's power? Something you mentioned, Gus. Jim Strong also mentioned the 8-inch reach of Joshua may be too much. Shout out to Unrivaled Boxing Talk. He's in the chat as well. Greetings to you as well, sir. So yeah, while we was going on, he called Andy Ruiz Bam Bam Bigelow. That's rude, GM Strong. That's rude. Bam Bam Bigelow. That's rude, sir. Funny, but rude.
That's fun. You know what? Rude's okay if it's funny.
A bit of correction here. He Unrivaled Boxing said that Andy Ruiz, he is now signed to PBC. GM Strong mentioned in our discussion about Ndam moving up from 160 is correct. So yeah, because I was mentioning that Ndam, I just don't think he has the chin, just too small. He says Unrivaled that Ndam is a gatekeeper at middleweight at best, never a top tier middleweight. Now he's fighting arguably the best super middleweight in the world. Not right. GM Strong thinks that Ndam will get KO'd. I agree. Fink said that Callum Smith should look for a plant unification bout before he leaves the division. Your thoughts on that, Gail and Gus? What you think about that? Should Smith be successful against Ndam? What do you think about the possibility of a unification bout with Caleb Plant?
I think from a political stance, in terms of a difficult fight to make, Mike. I can see I can see Saul Alvarez, somebody like Saul Alvarez moving up to fight Callum Smith before he has a unification.
Yeah, I agree. They're not going to cross political boundaries to make that fight easily until it's really their only option, and it's not at this point.
Within our discussion about Katie Taylor, GM Strong says that Taylor has more speed, but Persoon has more power. Unrivaled says that if Katie decides to move instead of planting her feet, she'll win comfortably. However, if she stays planted, she'll get hurt. Your thoughts on that? Is the key to the fight Katie Taylor using her footwork?
Delfine is not a one-punch knockout artist, Mike. She's an attritional puncher. I've seen her land hundreds of shots and not even hurt some of these girls with negative records. So I don't know if the power is legit.
Yeah, I agree, and that's not horribly unusual for women's fighters. But Taylor is developing into a pretty impressive power puncher. She scored a knockdown in the first round of her last fight and won, I believe it was a 7th round stoppage. And her growth as a professional has just been exponential. So it'll be interesting to see. If Taylor, what will be interesting to see is if Persoon does deliver punching power and starts to do damage to Taylor, will Taylor adjust and move if she needs to? That's the question. I think what Gus and I are saying is we're not quite sure she needs to move that much. I'm not sure there's enough for her to be afraid of.
And some back and forth discussion about Inoue, whether he's a superstar or not. I'm runner of Boxing Talk, aka McGregor, said that he thinks that Inoue is already a superstar. When was the last time when a 118-pounder had this much attention? Fink followed up asking, there hasn't been a lineal champion at bantamweight since 1987. You would be correct on it, sir. It all depends on whether you think that Canizales earned lineal distinction with his long reign. Some may consider him that, but he beat Kelvin Seabrooks, who wasn't considered lineal champion then. And then when Canizales, he vacated the title. So certainly since the days of Canizales, when he vacated the belt at the end of '94, there hasn't been. And it can be argued that, yeah, you're right, that there hasn't been a lineal champion since '87, and it could be a question of whether it was a lineal bantamweight champion in 1987. So yeah.
Mike, very quickly, when it comes to Inoue now, a lot of us here have spoken a lot about him for a number of years, but what people have really got to look into perspective is that his father and his promoter Ohashi, obviously, they strategically bypassed flyweight division, so he goes straight from 108 straight to 115. So therefore, he didn't really fight Gonzalez, Estrada, Amnet Ronrang, Kushuta Ioka, McWilliams Arroyo, Brian Valora, a lot of good power punchers who were there at 112, because he obviously his father felt that he wasn't ready for those sort of fighters at that point. So he is now. So people have got to really take that into question. So when you're moving straight from Adrian Hernandez to Omar Narvaez at 115, a 42-year-old, and obviously bypassing arguably Hall of Fame fighters who were at 112, who have obviously cemented their place at 115 subsequently. So you've got to put that into reflection. So his CV is not that good at the moment, Mike. Is not that great. He only cleared up a lot of the older sort of Japanese guard. So he's getting better. This is his pound-for-pound test, the 118-pound tournament. So his career, as far as I'm concerned, effectively starts at this sort of weight category.
My only pushback would be, Gus, is that if the argument is he moved up and bypassed Rungvisai, you would have you very much have a point. But in terms of Roman, keep in mind he came to the States and fought in Superfly 2 trying to seek out against a fight against Roman. And remember, if you watch the YouTube fight of his first title defense at 108, um, Japanese translation, they mentioned Roman Gonzalez, and Inoue said, "Yes, that's the fight I eventually want." And when Roman lost, it can be argued by some it made it easier for him, an easier option for him to move up to 118 pounds, because even though the fight with Rungvisai was there and people wanted to see that, the fight that he really wanted was a fight with Roman, be it at 115 pounds.
But they had already negotiated even before that, Mike, for the fight to take place in Japan.
Yes.
Gonzalez had already said, but look at what they were offering Gonzalez less than $200,000, Mike, significantly less than what he was earning.
That
He had, he had
I didn't know the amount that was offered. Only
he
amount
had to
I've heard
take
of being offered was for the rematch with Estrada, and he wanted $1 million for that, and they weren't gonna give him that. So
if they if he's going to take a 50% pay cut, then effectively they don't want the fight, Mike.
mm,
He's the lineal champion. He's the defending champion in his fourth weight category as well, and he's coming to Japan as well. So you're offering 50% less than what he's been earning in the United States. That
mm,
to me, Mike, they don't want the fight.
mm. That's, yeah, it's back and forth. GM Strong, you asked in the chat, is Neri banned in Japan? He's still presently banned from fighting in Japan. I forgot the guy that they're talking about. Okay, put it this way. In a
That
way, in an
that's his real.
interview, right? In an interview, talked about his future plans, and his ultimate goal is to become five-time five-division champion. They asked about a fight with Neri Fink, and he said that yes, he's interested. One of the barriers is the fight can't happen in Japan because of the situation with what's the guy he beat twice in Japan? He beat for the belt, Neri
Yamanaka.
Yamanaka. With the second fight and Neri being grossly overweight, the JBC suspended him for that, and that suspension is still ongoing. So yes, Luis Neri, he's still presently suspended in Japan. So that answers your question.
That
Uh,
is that fight for me is Naoya Inoue's true pound for pound fight. If he's able to dispose of Luis Neri the same way he's been disposing of all of the other fighters, then he's the real deal for me.
Yeah, so and I want to thank everybody for the comments. Fink, GM Strong, I'm Unrivaled, Nabil, thanks for joining us in the chat as well. Make sure to hit that like button, fellas. Make sure to hit that subscribe button as well. I'm going to wrap up some previews here. Talk about a couple of fights here. I'm going to wrap this 2-1 on both to you, both Gail and Gus. Joshua Buatsi, signed by Wilder to a promotional deal. He's one of Wilder's fighters, um, fighting on the undercard of this Joshua Ruiz bout. He's going to be stepping up a bit in competition, fighting Periban. Periban, of course, has lost to he's lost to Yildirim. He's lost to James DeGale, lost to Jellion Love by decision. So a step up fight for him, and fighter we've talked about here before on Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Josh Kelly, really talented welterweight, fighting Ray Robinson. Robinson lost an eliminator, I think late last year, may have been earlier this year. So I'm going to combine these two. Going to you first, Gail. Thoughts on Buatsi fighting what can be deemed a stepped up fight, as well as Josh Kelly making his both of these fighters making their introductions fighting in the United States. I'm a fan of both fighters. I think they are legit talents.
I absolutely agree. These are two terrific additions to the undercard. This is an excellent undercard. As much as the main event and the women's unification fight have gotten attention, there are a lot of tasty little tidbits down on the undercard. These two fights are two of them. Number one, they can fight in front of a sizable British contingent of fans in New York, and in doing so, introduce themselves to a fairly good-sized American and international audience. Buatsi, in particular, light heavyweight, he seems to have all the goods, and I am really pleased to see him stepping up against somebody like Periban, who's seen better days, clearly, as a veteran fighter, will be better able to gauge is the talent we've seen from Buatsi the real deal. And you have to have him come up against a gatekeeper like this to be able to tell. But he has everything it takes to be a big star. He's a light heavyweight in the Joshua mold. He really is. And the Josh Taylor fight should be a darn good time. Yet another rising star welterweight has fought some names that some people would know. He only has 9 professional fights, but he fought Carlos Molina and won a fairly easy decision over him. Fought a fighter I'm familiar with out of Argentina, Walter Castillo, knocked him out in the first round. That was quite an impressive performance. So this will be his first fight, professional fight, outside the UK. And boy, he couldn't have picked a better card and a better time to do it.
I'll go to you, Gus. I've said in the past, we've all the discussion regarding Anthony Yarde. Yarde is set to fight Kovalev this summer. It's always been my opinion that Buatsi is the more talented, better skilled, or more rounded out fighter. Thoughts on his fight against Periban and Josh Kelly? He's a bit flashy, but he's really, really talented. A guy who can fight southpaw. He fights southpaw mainly, but I've seen him switch to right hand as well. Can go to the head and body equally as well. The athleticism is there. He has good punch. Don't know much about his chin yet. But again, I think he's the good. He's also a pretty big welterweight. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a junior middleweight in the not too distant future. So your thoughts on Buatsi and Josh Kelly?
The Joshua Buatsi fight is one of the most deplorable pay-per-view fights I recall in a number of years. I'll just tell you how bad this fight is, Mike. If I stake 1,000 euros on Buatsi to win by knockout, which he's going to do, my return is only the 1,000 euros back, but I get only 26 euros extra. That's how bad this fight is. And we got to talk about the hypocrisy and double standards. If Anthony Yarde was fighting Periban, and we know is one of the most castigated fighters around, you could imagine the level of criticism that'd be forthcoming for him. But Buatsi just gets away fighting bum after bum after bum, even though he's got the deepest sort of amateur sort of pedigree, and he's obviously won a medal at the Olympics as well. So I have grave concerns at the way his career is being managed. So I'm not sure who wins out of those. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, Mike. I don't think his Yarde is as bad as people say. I think he's definitely has some ability there. And he arguably probably carries the power as well. So we'll wait if that fight ever happens, which I doubt anyway. It would have already happened because Anthony Yarde is not fighting no domestic level fighters, which is the weird thing. He had the chance to fight, Frank end of level boss Buglioni and Jose Burton, all of these guys, and he never elected to fight any of them. So his career trajectory has been very strange, but you can't argue with the way it's been managed. If he gets a world title shot now in Russia, getting about $6-7 million, credit to him. So, but Josh Kelly, Mike, I've said this before, I think he's a knockout waiting to happen.
Oh, really?
I'm not a fan of these hands down, quick twitch, reflex based fighters, because I've seen him being schooled by Danivir Yelusinov, Mike, against good boxers who are able to mitigate that. And there's no doubt that Matchroom Sports took down all footage of that fight because they didn't want, one of their most touted prospects, people saying that, him being just absolutely schooled by a pure boxer, which I think is eventually going to happen, Mike. Adam Booth likes that sort of fighter. When you're leaning back inside the pocket, you're using that reflex-based sort of action. Eventually, that's fine, Mike. But eventually, once he starts taking some punishment, and then reflexes are not as sharp as accurate, what's he gonna do defensively? Then he's got his hands down. Is he gonna go back to a conventional guard or what? Is he gonna slip and slide and roll punches? It's not his style, Mike. So it all looks good and pretty because he's devastating on the front foot, attacking and landing hard, snappy, quick, very visibly aesthetic sort of combinations. But this is a good matchup, Mike. This is probably the better fight on the whole card from my perspective. Ray Robinson, who got that defeat with Gideus Kavalauskas, who people don't like, but I liked him in the World Championship, and that I was impressed with him because he was knocking out cats going backwards on the back foot. Definitely some power there as well. That draw was a little bit controversial, I thought, but still it was a close competitive fight. So it's a live body, for Josh to fight. It's a major step up. So yeah, looking forward to that fight.
And GM Strong is in the chat saying that people have Kelly actually losing that fight. GM Strong also mentioned that commented that Yard Buatsi should have fought. Not as long as Yard was #1 ranked in the WBO. That fight was never going to happen. If it happens, it will be when either Yard or Buatsi wins a world title. Matter of fact, I will go so far as to say that if Yard beats Buatsi, if Yard beats Kovalev, that put it this way, it'll be. I don't see that fight happening anytime soon, unless it's somehow a unification bout. Because Hearn has talked about him saying he wants Buatsi in there ASAP. Yard has never responded. Yard has other he has other goals other than a potential fight with Buatsi. They're not going to put Yard in there against Buatsi unless it's big money. If it's not big money.
The only way that fight happens if Yard is the champion and Buatsi becomes a mandatory.
There you go.
And there's a purse bid. That's the only way that fight happens.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Because like I said, you think a bit higher of Yard than I do. I think a bit higher of Buatsi than you do. The problem is both camps, particularly Yard's camp, they don't want that fight to happen. Not now. Particularly Yard's camp. They don't want that to happen right now. They just don't. They want that Kovalev bout. They're thinking that Kovalev is going to be old, get that belt, get some defenses, and make some coin. Their position in Yard, many ways, is as kind of like a transitional figure, going a bit outside the realm of boxing, much in the lights of one Anthony Joshua. That's how they're trying to pattern his career. Would I be wrong in that, Gail, Gus?
Joshua does manage him, so there are some similarities.
Yeah. Your thoughts, Gail?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that.
So yeah.
No.
I thought Joshua managed Buatsi, but I could be wrong. And I think we're going to end the show on that note. Going around the panel here, I thought we would have Daniel from the Inscriber. He's out and about tending to some family affairs, so he wasn't able to make the show. So hopefully we'll have him on next week. And I will say right now, folks, that the next episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, will be Wednesday, Gail. So you will be able to make it. I know you do some media teaching on Monday, so you're not able to make it all the time when we do the show on Monday. So the next episode will be Wednesday next week. Going to you, Gail from Communities Digital News, for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk media talk issues around about media. Uh, Dancing with the Stars, Game of Thrones, which just ended. For those who want to talk those issues, those matters, let the folks know where they can find you.
You can find me. My regular column is on Communities Digital News out of Washington, D.C. That's COMM, Digi, D-I-G-I News, comdiginews.com. My main event preview is up. I will be posting on the women's fight a little later tonight. And also on the undercard, don't forget my buddy Chris Algieri making another appearance. And he looked good against Tommy Coyle for a WBO International Super Lightweight title. But I also recommend to you a very new, fresh middleweight fighter, Austin Ammo Williams, who has only one fight, but he shares a manager with Regis Prograis. And he is based in Houston with the whole Houston boxing scene. So he's a middleweight. Check him out. Austin Ammo Williams. His debut was a very impressive first round knockout. So we'll see what he can do tomorrow night.
Comment to you, GM Strong, Billy Joe in that whack belt. We haven't talked about Billy Joe Saunders in that fight, and for good reasons. For good reasons. It's not worth it talking about that fight. And you're asking
with Daniel.
Yeah, and the reason we didn't talk about Devin Alexander and Redkich, again, for reasons. If we're not going to talk about Austin Trout and Gausha, I'm not going to talk about Devin Alexander and Redkich. Only thing I will say is he needs to win if he's going to continue on with his career. Because if he doesn't, call it a day.
We aspire to high standards on this podcast. As we school pretty much all of the other podcasts.
Yeah, you may question our standards, but we do have standards.
There you go. I'll go on to you, Gus, for those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk music, because you also do music reviews. And Flying Lotus, Gus, I gotta hear a review from you from Flying Lotus. If you hadn't heard the album, I'll send it to you immediately at the end of the show. Want to talk boxing? Want to talk music? Let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yeah, first of all, respect to the chat, Fink and McGregor. Shout out to Jacob, Daniel, and Bo as well.
Indeed.
Yeah, folks can hit me up on Skype or on YouTube. Got a channel, Corruption in Boxing, focusing on sort of all aspects. A lot of the politics behind boxing as well, naturally, drug testing, but also on a lot of the weight divisions which don't get a lot of shine, specifically, the junior flyweight, which I've been raving on about for a number of years as being the best. So hopefully some post-fight videos will be postponed next week on that.
Indeed. Once again, thank everybody in the chat for joining us. Fink, GM, Unrivaled Boxing, aka McGregor. Who else? Nabil. Thank you for all your comments as well. Thank you for all your comments. I hope to have you back on future episodes. And as I said earlier, if you like what you heard, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. For those who want to talk boxing, but not with me, you know what it is on Twitter, Brother JR at Brother JR76. As I said to begin the show, if you want to find out all information regarding Pound for Pound Box Report, blog page is the place to go to. P4pboxreport.wordpress.com. That's the link. Hit the right of the page. You'll find links to where to find us all over social media, Facebook, Twitter. You know what it is there. Also, links to where to find us all over platforms that carry podcasts, the Spotifys, the iTunes, the SoundClouds, and all that. Links to the donate button. Gus, I'm gonna be looking for that donation since you won handsomely over the weekend. PayPal and Cash Me links. Let donation be the best nation. And for those who may not know, I am also a online health and fitness coach for Beachbody. Gail, I sent you the email earlier. The fitness accountability group we build together that starts July 1st. I got the links and all that set up. I got the challenge group page and all that set up on Beachbody. Be looking forward to you there. Hopefully, if you're interested in fitness, if you're interested in some fun and fitness, fun and exciting yet challenging fitness challenge and accountability challenges in terms of eating and diet and all that. Well, I don't like diet. I say nutrition because diet always has negative connotations that draws people away. So fitness and health and nutrition, just hit the Pound for Pound Box Report blog page as well. I have a link to my fitness online fitness page. On the next episode, we will do a recap of the Joshua Ruiz card, and we will preview Gennady Golovkin against Steve Rolls. That's right, Steve Rolls. So we'll talk about that fight.
Hey, he's not even the king of the North.
Mike, is Lunga Makabu and Mike Perez, is that still going ahead?
I don't know. I have
That's
to look
an
that
interesting point.
up. I have to look that up. I have to look that up. So we will talk about Triple G and Steve Rolls. We will talk about Oscar Valdez. He's fighting Jason Sanchez. So we will talk about those fights. Any other boxing news and whatnot in the interim. So for Gail from Communities Digital News, from Gus from Corruption and Box, again, shout out to Daniel who wasn't able to make it. Shout out to Jacob who wasn't able to make it. Shout out to Bo from Three Kings Boxing and Truth and Fact Sports Talk. I am your host, Michael. This has been episode 253 of Pound for Pound Box Report. Thank everybody in the chat. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.
Sayonara.